I would not blind you. I plan to make a gift of it to my mother.
Hey there guys, this is Richard, your host, with another marvelous video. This time, most vicious Targaryens ever. House Targaryen is noted for the variety of rulers it has provided. In A Storm of Swords, Martin writes, "Madness and greatness are two sides of the same coin. Every time a new Targaryen is born, the gods toss the coin in the air, and the world holds its breath to see how it will land." And quite rightly, we have had several different kinds of rulers, just rulers like King Jaehaerys, evil rulers like Maegor the Cruel, immoral rulers like Aegon the Unworthy. In this video, we'll explore the 10 most vicious Targaryens and dive deep into what makes these men and women the way they are. Let's begin. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Maegor the First Targaryen. Born to Aegon the Conqueror and his sister wife Visenya Targaryen, Maegor Targaryen was a born warrior whose battle skills were unequaled. At a very early age, he became a fine knight who lived for battles and tourneys. The well-built and broad man was bigger than the Conqueror himself, and his sheer presence could intimidate the best of knights. However, Maegor was not without flaws. In fact, he was a brutal man with a haughty nature who enjoyed violence, death, and power. He did not just defeat his enemies, but did terrible things to them, even after they had fallen. Over the course of time, he became king and gained several titles. He was called Maegor Targaryen, the first of his name, king of the Andals, the Rlyeha, and the First Men, lord of the Seven Kingdoms, and protector of the realm, had another title given to him by the small folk. They called him Maegor the Cruel. But why did this happen? Well, Maegor usurped the throne after his stepbrother King Aenys died. Maegor was not accepted by the faith, and the faith militant continually resisted him. Maegor did not even try to convince them, and instead chose steel and fire to shut them up. He burned down an entire sept on the back of Balerion, the Black Dread, and anyone who attempted to escape was shot by Maegor's archers. When Maegor decided to take a third wife, his Grand Maester objected to it, and Maegor decapitated him using black fire. But he gained the title of Maegor the Cruel when he killed his nephew Prince Aegon, who was King Aenys' Prince of Dragonstone. The Kinslayer was now a lost cause, and in one of his battles he brought back some 2,000 skulls, most of which belonged to innocent small folk. But there was another terrible thing that he did. So he had ordered the construction of the Red Keep and built many secret passageways and tunnels and a fortified fort within the Red Keep called Maegor's Holdfast. He even built 4 levels of dungeons, with the 4th one dedicated to torture. However, once the construction was finished, he killed each one of the workers so that no one would know the secrets of the Red Keep. The story is similar to the myth surrounding the construction of the Taj Mahal, the monument of love by King Shah Jahan. It was rumored that Shah Jahan severed the hands of all the workers so that they would not build another Taj Mahal for a different king.
Burn them all!
Where's my sister?
Aerys II Targaryen, also called the Mad King. Aerys Targaryen used to be a handsome man with gold silver hair and purple eyes. As a young man, he was generous and ambitious, but was not the most intelligent of men. In fact, he was rather quick to anger. He sat upon the Iron Throne after his father, King Jaehaerys II, died. But Aerys could not remain the charming man he was for long and started to lose his sanity, which was the result of several events, including a rebellion called the Defiance of Duskendale. So Lord Dennis Darklyn of Duskendale wanted a charter to be passed by the Crown, something that would give him more autonomy. When the Crown refused this, Dennis invited Aerys to Duskendale, but Lord Tywin Lannister, Aerys' hand, strongly advised against accepting the invitation. But King Aerys wanted to set the matter straight by himself and left for Duskendale with a small army. He walked into a trap and was taken captive for 6 months. In the end, Sir Barristan Selmy managed to rescue the king, and houses Darklyn and Hollard were annihilated. Only a child named Dontos Hollard was spared. The captivity had taken a great toll on Aerys, and the king refused to take baths, cut his hair and fingernails, or trim his beard. All this was rooted in his fear of being touched. It was said that his hair grew beyond his waist, and his fingernails looked like foot-long talons. He kept cutting himself on the Iron Throne, and became known as King Scab because of the several semi-healed wounds and cuts. The Defiance of Duskendale had exacerbated the king's mental condition, and he started seeing every small act of defiance as a major act of treachery and conspiracy against him. After burning the members of houses Darklin and Hollard, he had taken to sadistic punishments for those whom he thought were his enemies or traitors. He would simply burn them alive. His fascination with wildfire became so pronounced that after a point he would become sexually aroused only after watching someone burn to death. Now, this is a characteristic trait in several serial killers who get aroused and reach the climax after watching their victims die. His obsession with wildfire became the cause of his end. When Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, Aerys' son, apparently abducted Lyanna Stark, her brother and father were killed by the Mad King. After this, Ned Stark became the new Warden of the North, and Aerys wanted his head as well. However, Lord Jon Arryn refused to follow and joined hands with House Stark, House Baratheon, and House Tully to rebel against the Mad King and his tyranny. Aegon IV Targaryen, also known as Aegon the Unworthy. You know, one does not just get the title of unworthy, one has to work really hard to earn such things, and that's what Aegon IV did. The king was the grandson of Baelor the Blessed, but was anything like Baelor. Aegon proved to be a highly corrupt and decadent man who was not fit to rule. He indulged in every act unsuitable for a king at every opportunity he could find. He was once an attractive man, and this ensured that he could get any woman, irrespective of her being a highborn or someone from the small folk. Apart from his wife, he had a total of 9 known mistresses and numerous bastards that he had sired on these women. Some say that he could get practically any woman to lay with him, and it didn't matter if they were married or not. Naturally, his methods of excess and misrule have made him one of the worst rulers of the Seven Kingdoms and earned him the infamous title of Aegon the Unworthy. But how did it all start? Well, Aegon's debauchery and misrule started with trivial acts of seeking pleasure, but with time, his hunger for flesh and food became more and more insatiable. Soon, his appetite and greed knew no bounds, and his actions, motivated by corruption, led to horrors that haunted the realm for several generations. He filled his court with people who could praise and flatter him, instead of worthy people who were honest, noble, or wise. His thrill for amusement extended to women of the court as well, because he only allowed those women who could amuse him and let him satiate his lust on their bodies. Also, he would simply take the wealth of a house and give it to another or keep it for himself, and he did all this on his whims or because of greed. Depriving men of their rights became a common thing under Aegon the Unworthy's rule. Furthermore, he would give away priceless Targaryen possessions and empty his treasury so that he could have his way. For instance, Aegon gave away a dragon egg to Lord Butterwell because Aegon was allowed to impregnate 3 of Butterwell's maiden daughters, that too on the same night. Under his rule, favoritism was more favored than meritocracy. If you could appease him, he would please you. His ways were so pathetic that he renamed hills as teats. For instance, there was a hill called Barber's Teats. Promotions in the City Watch were bestowed on the basis of a man's ability to bring the king women of his choice, no matter if they were whores or innocent and decent women. The small folk found amusement and gossip in the king's methods, but little did they realize that his ways would become the reason for several generations of hardships. He was too greedy and lustful to be anything but disastrous. But his greatest folly was legitimizing all his bastards from his deathbed, a decision that attracted a series of rebellions and pretender kings.
From me. Let me go. I will find a ship and sail away, never to be found.
Aegon II Targaryen. If you're still watching this video, I believe Aegon II needs no introduction. I'm assuming that you've watched the first season of House of the Dragon, but for those of you who haven't, beware of spoilers. So, Aegon was born to King Viserys after the latter had named Princess Rhaenyra his heir. Aegon's mother, Viserys' wife, Alicent Hightower, tried hard to supplant Aegon with Rhaenyra, but that did not happen till the time Viserys was alive. While growing up, Aegon showed signs of a pervert who often pounced on the staff of the Red Keep, and later he would go on to visit the several brothels in King's Landing. He fathered several bastards and even introduced his younger brother Aemon to the pleasures of the flesh. Aegon was not interested in becoming king for most of his life. The reason behind this is the fact that he was just not interested in becoming king and wanted to continue with his decadent life of women and wine. However, when Sir Criston Cole in the book and Alicent Hightower in the show convinced Aegon that he would be dead if Rhaenyra became queen, Aegon agrees to wear the crown. But the crown does not change a man's personality, does it? Aegon remained a lecherous man, and although he fathered children on his sister wife Helena, he never truly remained faithful. Later in his life, he would become a cruel man who wanted to destroy his stepsister and everyone who supported her. When Aemon Targaryen killed Lucerys Velaryon, everyone in King's Landing criticized the act, but it was Aegon who patted Aemond on the back for killing their nephew. Aegon later became more sadistic and cruel and enjoyed feeding men and women to his dragon, Sunfire. Among the most notable of these unfortunate folk were Grand Maester Gerardis and Rhaenyra herself. Close to the end of the war, Aegon had suffered several injuries and could no longer take part in sexual congress. But a man has needs, right? And this man was a king. So Aegon often ordered couples to make love in front of him while he watched. I guess the cuck had grown kinda old.
I'm Queen Rhaenyra now. And you all are traitors to the realm.
Rhaenyra Targaryen. To all the blacks watching this video, I beg your pardon for putting this woman on this list, but you have to agree that she was not all good. Yes, Rhaenyra suffered way too many losses. She lost her children, her throne, and her very life to the Dance of Dragons. But that does not justify that she would submit herself to what can only be described as war crimes. She did not show her violent side until the death of her second oldest child, Lucerys, at the hands of Prince Aemond. After this, Rhaenyra went into a black fury and did everything in her power to sit on the Iron Throne, and she did succeed. However, the Iron Throne rejected her, and naturally she became more reckless and violent. After getting the throne, she started rounding up all those who had supported her stepbrother Aegon II. Heads started to serve as ornaments and spikes. It wasn't before long that Rhaenyra tasted treachery. Two of her dragon riders, named Ulf the White and Hugh Hammer, betrayed her and joined the Greens. After this, she became paranoid, much like the Mad King. She believed that the two other dragon seeds, Nettles and Adam Velaryon, would also betray her. She ordered their execution, but Adam Velaryon was alerted by Corlys Velaryon, who had named Adam the heir to Driftmark. Also, Nettles was spared by Lord Manfred Mouton, who believed that Nettles was protected under the guest's right. But I believe that the worst and most traumatic event done under her leadership was the assassination of Prince Jaehaerys by the assassins Blood and Cheese. One may say that she didn't have a direct role in the beheading of this innocent child, but she never really punished the ones who ordered and facilitated the act. Having said that, I'm of the opinion that the creators of House of the Dragon may change this sequence of events because they have been showing Rhaenyra in a more positive light than the show. But then again, the show ended with a close-up shot of Rhaenyra in which she had that "I'm going to do deadly things" look on her face. And one must fear a mother whose heart is filled with rage and grief. Daemon Targaryen. In a recent interview with The Hollywood Reporter, writer Sarah Hess said about Daemon, "He's become internet boyfriend in a way that baffles me." And I personally believe she couldn't be more accurate about the prince. If we look at the things that he's done, he was never good with any relationship. He's a terrible husband, father, brother, and uncle. I mean, incest is one thing, but smooching your own niece in a brothel? Is a new low. If you think that he's bad with personal relationships only, then think about this. He butchered and maimed hundreds of people as the commander of the City Watch. Yes, the people he killed were criminals, but I do not think that theft should be punished with death. If we ignore that for a moment, he killed his wife in cold blood and made jokes about his infant nephew's death. Some may rightfully say that he's the most badass Targaryen, but more importantly, Daemon Targaryen is nothing but a baddie, and people love baddies. I do not believe he ever truly loved any of his wives and married them for personal gain. Lastly, what strikes the last nail in the coffin of Daemon's goodness was his hiring of Blood and Cheese to slay Aegon II's child. If we think about it, he had issues with an eye for an eye, but he was fine with a son for a son. That's vicious and hypocritical.
Give me your eye, or I will take it, bastard! Not in my hall!
Aemon Targaryen. No list that talks about the most vicious Targaryens can ever overlook Aemon Targaryen, the one-eyed prince who became so obsessed with revenge that it fast-tracked the Dance of Dragons and transformed it into a war of fire and blood from a war that was being fought by ravens and emissaries. Yes, no child is born evil, and it's the circumstances that mold him into what he becomes. But Aemon's adult character and personality were pretty much a result of himself. Alicent and Otto had intentionally or unintentionally filled the hearts of Aemon and Aegon with hate against Rhaenyra and her children. But Aemon did nothing to see reason as an adult. In the book, he kills Lucerys just because he was insulted by Lady Maris Baratheon. At Storm's End, Lucerys and Aemond come face to face after the official commencement of the dance. The two princes exchange a few words and then Lucerys leaves, but when Maris asks Aemond if he had lost his balls with his eyes, Aemond loses his calm and asks for Boros Baratheon's leave so that he could kill young Luke. So, this is a clear indication that despite having knowledge of warcraft and philosophy, Aemond was quick to anger and almost gullible. Later in the dance, he becomes obsessed with killing his uncle. When he figures that House Strong may have helped the Blacks and Daemon, he destroys the entire house, leaving only a mysterious woman named Alice Rivers, who he keeps as his concubine. I believe destroying all the members of a house, including innocent women and children, is a crime deserving the most severe punishment. But that's not all. Aemond was responsible for several more deaths. Viserys Targaryen. The son of Aerys, the Mad King, was somewhat a victim of his circumstances and somewhat the result of his father's personality. Born 17 years after Prince Rhaegar, Viserys Targaryen's safety was considered paramount by the Mad King, who kept Viserys under close watch at all times. His wet nurse's milk would be tasted by the food taster, and even his mother would not be allowed to stay alone with him. He wasn't even allowed to make friends, and no gifts from any lords would be given to Viserys. Naturally, these treatments turned Viserys a bit crazy from the very beginning. When King Robert sat on the Iron Throne, Viserys was present in Dragonstone and was hailed as king by his supporters. However, he had to flee the place with his younger sister, Daenerys. The two of them wandered throughout the world for many years, never staying in one place for long. During his travels, he often stayed at the houses of noble and wealthy men and asked them for support, but he did not really get any great help. In fact, people started calling him the Beggar King. He grew into a cruel man who would hurt those inferior to him in social status. But then, he was far from a brave or strong man. He was rather weak and frightened, but tried to show the world that he was the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. But foolish and stupid men do not make good kings, do they? But in his defense, he had a terrible childhood, and by the time he reached adulthood, he had none who could guide him to become a righteous man. He became greedy and kept lusting over the Iron Throne, which he believed was his. The greedy and impatient man was often told by a few that people in King's Landing drank secret toasts to his health and prayed for his return. These words of flattery would further fill his heart with ambition and hollow courage. By the end, Viserys' frustration would vent out in the form of anger and rage against his sister. She often felt that she would have to marry him, but that didn't happen. Instead, he practically sold her to Khal Drogo in exchange for a promise of an army. So, you see, he was a vicious man with no kingly traits and a rather demented mind who could sell his sister if it served his purpose. The kind of things that Viserys told his sister in Game of Thrones is enough for anyone to loathe the character and hope for his death.
Dracarys.
Daenerys Targaryen. Daenerys Targaryen, the mother of dragons, breaker of chains, whatnot, met with a rather sad and disastrous end, but not before she herself plunged King's Landing into a disaster. Much like Viserys, his sister's life was also that of a royal who was forced to live a nomadic life. Was she prepared for it? Of course not. Did she learn things from it? Yes, quite a few. Through her journey across the world, Daenerys learned that people were not always what they seemed to be, and that everyone had an ulterior motive. Much like her father, she was a trusting person in the beginning, but as time passed and she tasted betrayals, she became more and more paranoid. Like the Mad King punished his enemies with wildfire, Daenerys punished hers with dragonfire. Thankfully, she did not feed them to her dragons, at least not on the show. Yes, she was very helpful once upon a time, and she rode her 3 dragons to the Great War, and ended up losing one of them. However, all that changed when her closest friend and confidant, Missandei of Naath, was killed by Cersei. The Mother of Dragons lost her shit and burned a city to the ground, an act that Lord Varys had warned Tyrion Lannister about. In reality, she always had a hot temperament and was rather quick to anger, and it was her able counselors who kept from acting on her impulses. People like Jorah Mormont and Tyrion checked her worst impulses and kept her from becoming the Queen of Bones and Ashes. However, there was only so much they could do. In the end, she chose to act on her will and decimate a city. She did all this in the name of breaking the wheel that always ran over small folk, and that's quite ironic. But she did not wish to stop with King's Landing. She was ready to decimate all other kingdoms. And yes, in the name of breaking the wheel of atrocities. But she was failing to see that her idea of justice was no lesser than pure evil and dictatorship. Naturally, Tyrion convinced Jon that duty was the end of love, and he stuck a blade into Daenerys. Interestingly, Drogon arrived at the scene and spared Jon, but destroyed the Iron Throne, the ugly office chair that was the mother of all evil. Some maesters believed that dragons were more intelligent than men, and Drogon proved that by recognizing that Daenerys' noble ends were rooted in evil means. Wysenya Targaryen. We know that King Maegor was feared and revered as Maegor the Cruel, but little do people know that it was his mother who played an active role in Maegor's nature and tragic fate. Wysenya was the eldest of the 3 Targaryen siblings who conquered Westeros. It is believed that Aegon the Conqueror married his elder sibling because of duty and his younger sibling, Rhaenys, because of love and desire. After Aegon had won the throne, he named his firstborn son with Rhaenys, the heir to the Iron Throne. Several years later, Wysenya gave birth to Maegor. After Aegon's death, Wysenya gave Aegon's Valyrian steel sword Blackfire to Maegor because she believed he was fitter to wield it than Aenys, the new king. Aenys was an unhealthy man since childhood, and his condition was exacerbated when his mother, Rhaenys, died. During his rule, Maegor took a second wife named Alice Hadaway and shocked the realm. Naturally, Aenys exiled his brother, who went to Pentos. King Aenys had named his son Aegon the heir. However, once Aenys died, Wysenya brought Maegor back and declared him king. She challenged anyone who defied her son's claim to the throne. And who could stand against the two of them? Wysenya rode Vhagar and Maegor rode Balerion the Black Dread. In her attempts to secure her son's position, she destroyed several houses and removed their names from the face of the earth. She even supported her son when he wanted to burn down the Great Sept at King's Landing and the Starry Sept at Old Town. Had Wysenya counseled her son otherwise, he would have listened because Maegor was like an angry teenager in a giant's body. He was rather gullible and was often swayed by the opinions of his mother and his third wife, Tiana. Alas, Wysenya did not do much to check her son's behavior, a trait that was adopted by Cersei Lannister while bringing up her son, Joffrey Baratheon. Had Wysenya been wiser, her son would have seen many more moons. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.